Hello, everyone. So it's another live episode and continuation of navigating the matrix of aggression. It is a topic that is invited me like years ago on the endeavor of my schooling and trying to understand the human condition, what it is, and how human behavior in all the spectrum of manifestation, covert, overt, impact the state of health and disease, particularly on females if they are more susceptible or higher susceptible for aggressive behaviors, either from the state of being the aggressor or being the target or the victim. So some don't like the word victim, but however, I say it is the lack of awareness in the condition or the state or the moment of vulnerability means the person themselves do not understand that they are opening the gate for a whole new paradigm to enter their lives, change their identity. Sorry, my apology. It changes their identity, it changes their perception and its impact on memory and its impact on the central nervous system dysregulation and the neurodevelopment. And then later on we understand right now, because like the severity of trauma and stress and eh, unresolved intergenerational trauma, because every one of us have been there is a load has been passed on from one generation to the other. However, within the socio-economical or geopolitical or the perspective or the dynamic of the culture around them, this left ignored or shoved under the rug. So the central nervous system is compromised already. And if we are aware of this, we're going to start the early intervention from the mother. And I said it before, suppose the female take 2 years to prepare her body for a child. That means we can modify a lot of unwanted factors that will pass through the placenta from 10 weeks into the neural tube and pass into the offsprings. And the vicious cycles continue with all the challenges and all the overwhelming state that the body, the biological system are not prepared to handle it. So the state of the mind becomes overwhelmed. It put the load on the biological system and the molecular mechanisms, and here the compromisation of the excitotoxicity ratio and the allostatic load and so on and so on. And we see the manifestation like suicidal rates from 7 years old, schizophrenia from 7 to 10 years old. We see anxiety and depression. Become natural to push us to accomplish a task or feel normal that we feel sad in a state, because this is human emotions. But however, it become really clinical 18 years and older, and that compromise the biosystems. And then the we started to see the chronic illness and neurodegenerative diseases at early age. Parkinson's start in the 20th in the gut. So that is serotogenic and dopamine misalignment metabolism state, with the stressors that coming onto the human life. It I say I have to say it as it is. Abuse becomes the state of normalcy within societies. So we take the state of heightened distress, heightened abuse, heightened control and dominance over their subordinate. It become the norm. It can be masked in different ways, and it can be clear if there is awareness within the family dynamic or the community dynamic. It can be covert, overt, or it can be like either ways. It's a confusion state. The person doesn't know where they stand and what is going on, and that is part of the manipulation of the aggressor, creating the state of confusion. So the person or the target have in their mind or their mind body connection is separated, and they reach the state of inhibition of non-decision making. Non-decision making, that the body is taking more the state of confuse. It changes electrobiochemistry, it changes the neurocircuit, it changes the biosystems of function, it changes the heart rate variability, it changes the blood pressure, and whatever the body, the cellular mechanism started to have like a state of confusion. Things are not supposed to do this function are doing it. So this is the compensation mechanisms, because the organ or the system that is supposed to carry on this functionality has been depleted or compromised. So the body is trying to compensate to keep you alive. And we have this state of chronic illness and psychiatric conditions. It is like the chicken and egg paradigm, and it is like a whole city set in flooding system, but they don't know how to control the source, or how to mitigate, or how to save lives. So this is like the state of flooding of dysfunctionality and abnormalities within societies, and that is become with a responsibility. uh, Even I am a scholar practitioner, I'm still a student, I'm still learning, but I carry responsibility to share with the public. Okay, there are certain things we, as culture, as societies, as relationship dynamics, it reaches the state of normalcy, means that is the norm. It is what it is. And when we say it is what it is, I mentioned before in videos, that is a critical state. It can reach the state of crisis, and it can reach the state of losing lives. And this is what we see in many from the media, social media, newsletters, or whatever dissemination of information channels is. We can see cognitive overload and reach the body into the overwhelmed state that the body cannot take it anymore. And this, when the genotype phenotype interactions, and if the person is predisposed to the genetic predisposition for aggression, for the cluster A and B and C, for the antisocial behavior. Antisocial means against society, against society as a whole. They refuse, or they are against anything represent this culture. So that is why you see they may take the things in their own hands. So that what it's turning into harming not only the individual but the collective. Sorry. And imagine the just state. I don't know why. Imagine this state that if a child, and this is highly directly correlated with domestic violence, with group conflicts, for war zoning, uh, anonymity. You see this friend enemy, the masking of the hate crimes. We see it manifest in many ways, but we ignore what is the input with and how long it took to process into the individual who is their electropiochemistry already biologically designed to harm. So we don't ignore that in the science they calculated lately that is a dark, a very highly masking, disguising 7% of the population. They estimated it is the side of the population of Florida. So that is not an easy number. That is a lot of number. Imagine one person out of 10 or 3 people out of 10 carry these or 7 people out of 10. That's increase the load of excited toxicity, allostatic, and the unless we start from early age, we educate, we spread the knowledge that it is no longer these simple societies, simple communities. Love thy neighbor. Love thy neighbor as you love yourself. And thy neighbor means human, as general, human. So, because we are created in the image of God, so we are honoring God in whoever we are coming across or interact with. But however, you don't know that there is something within specific individuals that they don't like to see in others, and that is what, and the hardest part in psychology is the negative emotions and the complex emotions which indicate love, because love can harm or can be good and bad, both. So it is a double-edged sword. Jealousy, envy, COVID envy. We call them the ill spirit of the ill fruit of the spirit. So that means that things that really encourage the very dark characteristics of demonic energies. So that means, and that is natural. That is in their electropiochemistry there. We don't know that God has wisdom in that the good and the bad and the ugly exist together for a reason, for a purpose. So maybe this is that testimonial. Maybe this is the test. Maybe this is identifying our strong relationship with Him, who we choose to side with. And greater is in you than who is in the world. But how can from early age we understand that our true relationship have to start with God, and then we go from, because we honor Him, and He created everything, and He said it is good. It is good. So He was happy with what He created, and He gave us all over the world freely. He only asked us to honor Him in everything He has given to us. That is all what He asked. Even sending prophets, but still human nature, human condition, the reptilian mammalian brain is deviating due to greed, due to lack of faith, due to like the blind fold of the eye, or as we see in across across ages brainwashing. It's just like using the minds of those who are vulnerable and try to change them to the characteristic they would like to take advantage of in the community or society. So it's very complex. Aggression is very complex. It is not easy, and over and over is going to start to be correlated with the genotype phenotype and how the environment impact that, and the personality trait, the temperament theory, a lot of things I'm going to bring today as well, because it is a very broad matrix. And then it intersect with ethics and laws, and where I stand from this. What can should I take things in my hand, or should I be educated and be self-aware and started to make an educated, informed decision? And this is okay. Setting your boundaries, limitations, identify where you are, know the red flags, and the red flags can be like a whole book of red flags, but we have to identify, are we infusing fear? No, we are trying to take the blindfold from humans and don't understand that I have got all the powers. I can't do anything in this world. Nobody can judge me, or I can do anything. And anything in this unconditional, I don't know what it is. So there are humans are very subjectable, or deeply, they they are very empathetic, they are compassionate, they are kind, and that is how God created them. But unfortunately, they are the food for whoever would like or don't like to see this in others, because either from their psychological pain, from their trauma pain, from their history, uh, they don't like to see anything good in front of them. They don't like to see anything fruitful. They would like they are like have and declared the oath that will allow others to suffer as they suffer in nobody. So these are who take things in their hands and ready. We don't know how long this is brewing behind the scene. And I mentioned before, it doesn't manifest in solo. It is networking, it is organized, it is strategic, it is deliberate, it is intentional. No matter what I say, it is planned. And no matter what I say, that is how they choose their pathway of life. So if we understand that 7% of the population as a state of Florida already have these traits, we have to be aware, and we have to bring awareness to everyone. And even you see them, so they have limitations. They have how far you allow them close to you. So that is your responsibility. How far you can play the gray rock, so don't, or the jade tactics. So we see that. So this is not only from the psychological, because I stated before that everything emotional, mental, psychological, social, whatever factor is the social determinant of health, the inequalities or health disparities, all this physiological, has been measured on physiological state. There are biomarkers, there are changes in the neurocircuitries, there are presenting a whole new person every 5-10 years. But how can we prevent that? And we'll start with, that's what we say, women health is high priority, because aggression is the genetic predisposition is passed through the mother as well. We're not accusing, but this is one of the genetic predisposition. It can be familial history, is going from one generation into the other, so intergenerational. So taking this load from one generation to the other and never addressed, and there is normalcy in it, there is a predisposition, high predisposition for the child to um, to to be compromised. So we have to understand that the education started with the nucleus is a family. The nucleus is a family. So if we would like to restructure a healthy community, a healthy society, a healthy well-being, honor God in everything, we have to start with family. We have to start with the first nucleus, the first unit of the modeling, the shaping, the observation, the imitation, and what dynamics are going in this, and how can we be open, how can we be honest that this is what exactly happened. Divorce rate now exceeded marital rate, it's 51%. So how can we this the holy gathering between two persons that become one in God's unity, how they turn into this restless. So we started to go to more into the larger community from school, from friends, their community all around their neighborhood and their institution, and then state or nations. So it's all this human ecological model is you are bi-directional, you are impacted, and you are impacting as well. So it's bi-directional, but how it is positive or negative, that is depends on the core beliefs that has been shaped from early age, that is from the nucleus, that if I see abuse as a norm, so that is what I'm going to do. As I said it before, there is a slavery mindset that expected from a specific individual to do exactly, but they are not asked what the other will do for them. So it is one-sided relationship, and when it was one-sided, it is toxic, it's unhealthy, it is impacting it. The person is changing their identity and they are being compromised. So we understand that there is lots of culture dynamics. There are lots of socioeconomic. There are lots of geopolitical, and I said some are like see specific culture, specific community, specific individuals as a whole. They are being judged because of what has done from this nation or group or that over ages, and the circle goes on. And when the reptilian mammalian brain is acting from this limbic response, the prefrontal cortex is blocked, so there is no higher cognitive function for having a healthy dynamic and questioning, is this healthy or unhealthy, is this okay or not. So it shut down the healthy way of thinking. It shuts it down. So the person is acting from limbic response, fight, flight, freeze, fawn, fiend. So it is all impacting the triune brain, the polyvagal theory, as I said, is from sympathetic, parasympathetic, and dorsal vagal. So all this, the body, we see it in high chronic illness, the body is shutting down. It's ready to surrender. It's ready to give up. And I stated I witnessed and I experienced very hard, challenging situations, and I witnessed cases are shutting down. So is it a personal responsibility? Yes. When you understand the consequences of a masked behavior across culture, we have to bring light on that if we would like to heal, if we would like to redeem, if we would like, and if you would like really to heal and redeem, you work on your nucleus unit. That is your family. You work on the focused unit, that is you, how to heal the intergenerational trauma within you, and how to be better you every single day. It is not the whole world, it is you, not anybody else. So how can we understand, we shift from the revenge, the aggressiveness, the enmity, the competitiveness, the opponents, all this, how we can shift from all this negative influence on the human life, and how we shift it into this reconciliation with the self first, and understand your boundaries, limitations, and understand your intergenerational trauma and its impact on your interpersonal relationships and your quality of life and your health and state of health and disease. How can we do that? How can we bridge this gap? As I stated before, if you go to the clinic, you have 15 minutes with the doctor. So what is your responsibility from there? Imagine we have to shift the paradigm that our relationship with our practitioners, it's a partnership, it's a reciprocity, it's asking questions, it's understanding, it is educating, it is empowering yourself. It is like when I leave the clinic or the place I am trying to get an answer for my questions, what is my assignment after that? So it's a lifelong learning process. If we would like to increase the quality of life, your health and wellness, your relationships with God and others, with your community, how you relate to others, and identify that the 7% do exist, they have impact, and their impact can be very highly powerful in dehumanizing and compromising the human condition. So we have to understand that there is like the water and the fire. So what we can do, what you increase. So the more you are in the water side, the more you are nourishing and educating and opening your eyes and taking this blindfold to redirect your responsibility to understand what you need to do, how you can empower children, how you can empower those who are like female, 62%, how you can empower them, how can you, because we would not only the, because I see more the projections with the shoulder and the movement. So still we are talking about the power demonstration, the external power demonstration whenever the person goes, but we are not focusing what is going internally. Even you call it courage, if you call it decisiveness, if you call it assertiveness, what is going internally? So this is understanding between the external, why I am projecting. We are all projecting. We're making choices 24/7. So what things are you projecting? From what systems are you operating? So I'm coming today to it's another journey, part 12 in aggression and cunning behaviors. So we identified some of the cunning behaviors in part 11. I'm going to continue what they look like, because we say that this is the masking of the dark tetrad, or the what we call it antisocial, or other narcissistic megavillain, whatever it is, in projection or shaping or grooming the target, and how they can gain control and dominance over their lives. We see majority are children, adolescents, young adult, and females. So how can, that's a whole world. That is a whole world. That is shaping the trajectories of what we are dealing with, and how we can not only survive. We hear the word thrive, but what does it mean when it correlates with psychological safety, and what does it mean by safe, because it is different from what means safe for me is different from the person and the other person definition of safety based on their past, their trauma history, or their lived experiences. That is the moment that everything changed in their life, either the good or the bad. So we have to understand that the dynamic that internally and externally to shape or to form inform a decision. So let us go and dive deep into the part 12 is continuing aggression and cunning behavior. Aggression and cunning behavior. It is I'm gonna discuss it from integrative approach and conceptual level overview. So it is like what is formed in the mind and the body language, or the manifestation in health and disease. It's clinical, forensic, pop psychology discourse, or research based, how it is being observed and seen and experienced, and its impact on the biological and neurodevelopmental, and how we can shape or form an educated perspective. It's not only limbic driven. Sorry, so limbic driven, or the person is already acting from heretic relevancy, what is familiar, what is known, and the body trigger. If they are predisposed or positioning or conditioned for limbic response, so there's going to be all reactive. And that is part of the aggressor use as well, using the emotional, the impacting the reptilian mammalian brain reactivity. So we have here, I'm going to bring different dynamics that can manifest in cunning behaviors in correlation with aggression, like reactive abuse, baited fights, psychological grooming. What does it mean by predatory brain? That this is how they are designed, or this is based on another time what had happened in majority in the mother's life on the level of electrobiochemistry, and passed on through the offsprings. It's a correlation with power, control, deception, emotional regulation, neurobiological vulnerabilities in the victim or the target. What are like the behavioral tactics that the abuser use and target the vulnerabilities of the brain, the psychological impact, and how they exploit this in their victims. So they are, as I stated, positioning for stress, trauma, neurodevelopmental, chronic interpersonal abuse, and the change of the brain circuitries, and alter the gene expression in epigenetic, that is the gene environment interaction, and its effect in identity, self-coherence, and how to understand the clusters, because every behavior presents itself in clusters. So if it is an individual incident, is maybe the person one of the justification, I had a bad day or not aware of it. So that is, there is a disconnection between clusters and individual incidents. So means it's not happening again, or it keep repeating itself. So how this will be seen from, for example, we say the heading in the transitional matters in molecular psychiatry and neurodevelopment, how this can guide us to make an informed decision and what compromisation have taken place. For example, I say there is some tactics, and they are using to impact or have negative influence on the target and affect their neurocognitive perception, memory, function. So aggression, verbal or physical, yeah, they cause shock, dominance, and threat. The experience of that the target the target is experiencing fear, submission, hypervigilance. It's based on the dysregulation of their central nervous system. Cunning manipulation, they use deception, misdirection, masking motives. So to get or set up, that's what we call it, the set to failure. Or they are setting the target to fail in any perspective or any approach they are taking. So they causing confusion, doubt, second guessing, or self-doubt. They don't know where they stand. And that is part of gaslighting as well. Psychological grooming, they face the escalation, trust building, normalization. So, for example, they are super kind, they are so loving and caring, and then suddenly shift into this accusative and defensive and negative perception and demeaning the target. So, and then they go back. So they escalate and they cool down, they escalate and then they cool down. That is part of the psychological grooming. Then it comes to the target will lower their guard and lower their defenses, and they become more dependent on the aggressor. So they don't feel they are in a state of helplessness, inability, or incapable of doing any decision or anything in their life without their the aggressor input. Baited fights, like provoking reactions. So they create situations that the person is gonna, they understand that this is novella, they understand the pattern, they understand their victim, they understand the person reactivity to that. So they understand that they're very tactical and strategic in that. So they do the situation, it trigger the victim, and then the blame shifting, and then see, that is why I don't, or that is why I don't want to tell you anything, that is why I don't want to put you in this situation, that is why I don't give you these tasks, or that is why I don't choose you, that is why. So justification for their ill behavior, and they're set up for their target provocation. And I stated that if the target is being, they can, one cases I stated before, it took 19 years till it's already be seen clear to the public and the justice take place. But unfortunately, it was too late that the victim was completely compromised. So the victim reacts, so then they portrayed as the aggressor. So they started to allow the target to believe that it is their fault that they did that. That the target is aggressive, and some are being labeled as aggressive, and other negative connotations, because the cunning or the con individual already knows the pattern. So the public, or the whoever or group, whoever would like to be influenced to the perception of the target as aggressor, and the one to be blamed, and the one to is the problem. It is not seen, it is hidden, because the aggressor is very good at masking their aggression with calmness and callousness. So it is subtle, it is not seen to others. What they see is the reactivity of the target. So they are the one who is going to be blamed, not the one who caused the harm. Word salad or semantic confusion, like overload with disjointed languages, is just like dropping words you don't know what they mean or what, just to create this. They shake the confidence of the target, that they don't know what to do or what they mean or what's going on here. So it causes like cognitive disorientation and mental exhaustion, because repetitive patterns like this, they are toxic, they are very energy depleting, and that what the aggressor is after, is depleting the target energy, because they don't they feed, either they feed on this energy. So when they deplete it, they are satisfied, they are happy, or they don't like to see this energy, so they would like to break down the targets. So that is, it's very highly tactical, and it is not sometimes it is not physical, because physical is going to draw the attention. Physical is going to draw the attention. It is psychological grooming. It is mental and psychological and emotional. Majority is emotional. And we hear a lot about the emotional trauma and how it has its impact on the electropyochemistry. And now the research is showing the manifestation of the biomarker mapping and its impact on the state of health and disease. And that's why we need to head into early intervention from early childhood to understand what is exactly presented on the physiological, because these biomarkers already, we can see them on the reports, on lab reports, on neuroimaging. Now the direction into neuroscience is gonna differentiate between the aggressor brain, because they have some function and structure abnormalities that allow them to their electrobiochemistries function differently from the target. And then what has been compromised on the brain of the target over time, or what are biomarkers, what are signs and pictures are being presented from lab work and neuroimaging, like QEEG or fMRI or PET scans. These are all is gonna see the what regions has been compromised, the thinning of the gray matter and white matters, the shrinking of the hippocampus, the corpus callosum area. So a lot of things that is showing into research right now, and it's highly, especially when the victim started to be perceived as they are the aggressor or they are the abuser. So there is a confusion here, and this is ethical and low state, when what we need to do to identify abuse and its biomarkers. For example, social media mentoring, say, like surveillance, triangulation, and digital gaslighting. Now they are saying that the digital platform, the cunning behaviors found their fertile ground in this. Platforms, especially when the more you press like onto something, that from the analytics on the other side understand what uh, what things you are attracted to and what things you like and dislike. They read your comments and they shift their behavior on that to mimic what you have already presented. So they are mimicking your behavior. They don't feel the feelings. They don't feel the feelings, but they would like to see what is the entry point here to infuse this harm onto the target. So they cause intrusion, internalized surveillance, and paranoia. So the person said, because it's anonymous or you didn't know exactly, so many times that you have fake profiles. Imagine your web page or your social media uh, all of a sudden shifted into something you already posted or you commented or you like it or talked about. Understand that this is one of the cunning behaviors, but masking anonymously behind fake profiles, fake names, and a lot of things are happening. And the utilization of AI right now. So it presents itself cyber aggression is a whole different realm, and cyber criminology and psychology is a huge realm to understanding, but it has a high impact on the neurocircuitry and the biological system functions, and especially the younger the individual is, the more they are being groomed and being brainwashed and being impacted to do what the aggressor wanted them to do. So they are redirecting or manufacturing the behavior of humans. Testing waters or probing them, just they try to push boundaries to see what the reaction of the target is. Are they are gonna be tolerance? Are they gonna accept it, or they are gonna push back? So that will give them the violation of the boundaries. They give them the speed of reaction, so how fast they can go and mission accomplished. So how will the yes, will the target adapt to the unaccepted behavior? Are they are gonna resist, or what's going to happen? So they are testing waters. um, the abuser mindset, it is pattern seeking. So they are studying the victim or studying the person with everything over months, over years, over decades. They don't give up unless an easy target showed up. They started to bait on them. They move on to another target. So it is based on the how far the target is more vulnerable. Vulnerable means available to them to penetrate their boundaries, to penetrate their trust, to penetrate their safety, and so on. As I stated, its impact on the neurobiology is heavy, especially among females. And I stated before that those who were abused, they can become the abuser to project pain onto others so that they don't feel their pain, or they think that because this happened to them. So the justification of the abuse started to take more space in the neurocircuitry and the belief circuitry, the shifting of the values, the corruption of their values, and it started to present another Another sense of reward in taking over the vulnerability of others. So taking over the vulnerability of other is a sense of reward to the aggressor. So how they get the reward, how they are happy by harming, that is how they function. um, Majority is emotional, mental, and psychological tactics. So they are the victim will be, as I stated, it is systematic targeting over time. It is very strategic and it is calculated because they understand this is what they are going to get from. This is the reaction they are looking for. This is the exposure of the person they are gonna get out of the trigger or the manipulative tactics that they are using. They are using fear, helplessness, confusion, cognitive dissonance. So the victim will lean into phoning. They will agree with the aggressor of whatever they are doing because they are in a state inability to be separated or to move on from the aggressor. Their inability is inhibited. Is escalated, create internal conflict in the victim. So to create the fracture self, the shame, guilt, self-blame, rumination, because if depression has a genetic predisposition as well. So if this with stressors and the high toxic load of interaction and grooming over time, so the person will have this sense of rumination. And I said a rumination, that is the default network and reticular formation, and how this play in rumination. These are two different regions, but how they intersect in rumination. I, I spoke about these regions in the brain as well, because you are fearful and wonderful me. The aggression matrix, the aggressor understand what they want to get is the joy out of pain of others or causing harm to others. That is what they are seeking. That is their source of nourishment or joy. But what happens in electrobiochemistry and the biosystems, that is left for the society to carry the price, to carry the burden, and see over time in disabilities, in damaging relationships, in hardships, in challenges, in obstacles, in all this dark phase of life they project onto the victim, but it's not from God, not from God. And I persist on this. That is man made crisis. Man made crisis. It's not God. And I that is my belief. I don't believe anything else. But I have to understand what mechanisms, what things I am dealing with, and how can I be more assertive. It's not aggressive. Be more assertive, understand my boundaries and limitations, say things as it is, say things as it is, as you see it. Because if we're not addressing it, it's going to accumulate over time. And this is what the aggressor would like, to build this self-doubt, self-fractured, and shame and guilt cycle, and leading to self-harm. So understand the self-harm doesn't happen in solo. It has, like, you are making a recipe, you have the right ingredients, you have the right moisture and temperature, and the tools that you are using for this recipe. So if it is left, if it is overdone, it will miss its like deliciousness or savory. If it is underdone, it is gonna be like it's not appealed to the consumer. So the aggressor knows exactly like this. You are an object for them. You are not human. They don't see humans. They see object or tools to be used to feed on this electrobiochemistry. This is what would like to do. Gaslighting, that denial, I didn't say that, I don't do that, it is all in your head, we don't mean that, it is all your conclusions, this is your assumptions. And so that is denial. Misattribution, so that, oh, because of you, because, so framing the victim as a mistaken, so the victim is the problem. So that creates self-doubt, reality distortion. So the victim doesn't know exactly what's going on here. I don't understand. I'm confused. And that is what, once you say, I am confused, they would like to feed on that and increase on more confusion, more lack of honesty and clarity. So the situation is not being solved, the situation is escalated. And we, uh, like they blame that the target, that they escalate the situation, they don't want to solve it, even though they are the one who caused it, conditioning and positioning the target into the state of confusion and reality distortion and self-doubt. So no matter what you do, no matter what you do, they are not ready to take down their accusations. So that is what the state they would like to move forward. That is the schema is, or the narrative is presented within life. Another like we see as another tactic. So we see they are reaching for reactive abuse. So here, reactive abuse, baited fights, and baiting. So baiting or provocation, a manipulation, a manipulative strategy in which the abuser deliberately provokes or taunts the target, often in subtle or camouflaged ways. This is over, unseen, unnoticed, the subtle. It's family affair. For example, I'm laughing at that because, yeah, it is said it's a family affair. So we didn't, I don't know. To elicit an elicitation, they work on elicitation. That's hard. And that is a whole different training for the person to know this illicit tactic and emotional reaction. Anger, like anger, defensiveness, frustration. So these are the point of a vulnerability they seek to infuse or project what they want you believe and others believe about you. Once the target reacts, the abuser may use the reaction to further the narrative that the target is aggressor or unable to see how irrational they are. Like uh, reactive abuse is a term often used in counseling or abuse literature to describe the phenomena in which a victim, under severe provocation, reacts in some way, verbally or even physically. So imagine somebody, because yeah, I mentioned before, love can be a double-edged sword. So the way of grooming and let's see, grooming and mimicking the need or the psychological need of the target. For example, the target doesn't didn't experience love in their child. Normally, it was early childhood ones. That is why some groups would like to see, I'd like to understand your childhood because I care about you. Be aware of that. Be aware of that. That is understanding the childhood wounds to be used and to be manipulated, and to be abused. So sometimes we say how far the person is aware that oversharing can be the tool for their breakdown over time. Normally, and it's correlated as well with attachment theory, like disorganized attachment, avoidance, dysregulated, all of that. It's all creating a wound is gonna present itself with every experience, with every situation, because the body keeps the scores. So it is stored in your cellular membrane. It is stored in your cellular membrane. Once the input is presented with these cues, the body takes over. So mostly majority, like they said, emotionally, this is female majority. Verbally, they use verbal defensiveness. Male is physical, but sometimes we see both verbally and physically in female reactivity or reactive provocation. So the abuser then frames the reaction as an evidence of the victim's pathology or aggression. So that is a trait that needs to be, it's a disease now. So pathology is correlation with disease manifestation. So or aggression, turning the victim into an offender. So when the victim is become an offender, that is a whole different narrative. It has its psychological, mental, emotional, social, economical, quality of life. It changes in the allostatic load because something has been compromised, but the target cannot defend himself if they are codependent or in a state they don't have the evidence, they don't have the voice, they don't have the advocacy or self-efficacy, how to defend themselves in a way that will allow them to grow from this experiences, not to be turned against them as an offender in the narrative. And in the psychological schema now, what is missing is that narrative. What narrative is presented here, and what factors are included in this narrative needs to be investigated thoroughly, and who needs to be empowered through this process of investigation. So that is, I don't accuse any either the other offender. I'd like to know now if they are reflecting from the psychopathology or physiopathology. So there are markers for that. There are analysis for that. There are neuroimaging for that. There are family history, medical history. There are lots of, we call it a whole comprehensive profile of aggression. So this included the physiological, psychological, emotional, trauma history, family history, medical history. All of that is going to be taken within the specific tools or specialized tools for psychometrics, lab work, and neuroimaging. And the ethnicity, race, culture, lots of things taken into this profile to exactly make a stand from psychiatric, from medical, from psychological, and from all law and see law perspective as well, or their legal state on the situation. But see, we see all of this. These are cases, and it can take years. It can take months. It can take. Well, you never know, because we ignore the early education and early awareness on how can we identify there is a pathological tendency in even a child, and the environment will impact them. So how can we restructure the environment so we mitigate the harm that can be presented along the way? If they are prone to harm, how can we shift that the opposite side from early age? So baited fights linked to baiting, in which a disagreement is manufactured and everything they manufacture. So they are like a designer of obstacles, the challenges, the conflict. That is how they function. This is their juices they survive on, is the creating division, creating conflict, confusion. This is the paradigm of their electrobiochemistry, while the other is empathy, compassion, kindness, giving, caring, or nurturing. Over that, what they are seeking, they will seek the approval of the aggressor. They will say, okay, what can I do to make you happy? But unfortunately, this is the toughest word that the person can be blindfolded and adapted to abuse and more psychological trauma, emotional trauma, and physical trauma. It's linked with the criminology as well. So see here, or stalked to the target is drawn into a fight under the abuser terms. The abuser may appear calm and rational, whereas the target is emotionally reactive because there is injustice. There is a natural anger for injustice. But however, uh, whatever others see, they see the reactivity. They don't see the narrative between the intention, the motive, the electrobiochemistry, the neural function structure, the biosystems, the ecological system of both sides of the equation, and who else is involved in that, because it's layered. It is multifaceted and layered. It's complex. It's not easy. But all the group are seeing what is projected, what is seen. And we normally get normalized, but we believe what we see without questioning. That is conditioning. That is the positioning. That is putting the scenario or the schema for others to behave in a certain way to project a specific outcomes, because it is done before and it never failed. So why it gonna fail now? So these tactics depend on asymmetries of emotional regulation and the abuser control over the interpersonal framing. The abuser manipulates the context so that whatever environment, whatever need, so we have to understand the behavior within the given context. The timing, the place, the person, the environment, all of this multifaceted. So the target's spontaneous human emotional response looks unreasonable or pathological. They call them gullible. They call them they are easy to manipulate and easy to shift their perspective. Grooming is a concept more familiar in abuse, especially sexual abuse. It refers to a staged process by which a predator gradually wins trust, reduces resistance, normalizes boundary transgressions, and fosters compliance, because the love in their understanding is compliance or silence. So the victim will agree with whatever or go with whatever they wanted them to do in the target or surrounding network. The steps often include target selection, vulnerability identification. They study, they understand. They tell me, I am interested in you. I care about you. Tell me more about your childhood. Tell me more about your high school relationships. Tell me about your college. Tell me about. They ask more questions, and you talk more, and they are only listening and recording what they wanna specify as a vulnerability in the target, and they plan accordingly. Befriending, boundary testing, desensitization, sorcery or coercion, they can influence the spell work on the victim, so they can manipulate their energy and manipulate their perception. And this has happened. And the maintenance control, for example, the social media grooming may also be digital, through texting, progressive enticement, isolation from other contacts. In broader manipulative relationships beyond the sexual context, psychological grooming can analogously refer to a process of emotional calibration. The abuser first offers kindness, and I said it is this flattery, kindness. They mimic the good behavior, but they don't feel the emotions. They don't feel it. They mimic the need. They don't feel the emotions. And validation, love bombing, and then they flip the table onto the target. This is creating that shaky ground where they can stand, and confusion, state of mind. Then gradually introduces small violations, gaslighting, denies, shift blames to incrementally erode the target's resistance or sense of reality. This making abuse less noticeable. It's normalization of the abuse. Because grooming is sometimes used loosely in popular sources, one must be careful. So grooming is primarily used when there is a predator-victim dynamic, often involving minors. So this is grooming. They look at what is your need, emotionally, socially, psychologically, financially, providing for gifts, showering you with lots of things, and you say, "Oh my goodness." Yeah, my family didn't do that. You are so kind, you are so wonderful. So, and then when they get the control of the on the target, they start to shift to the other face. They turn it to another person. The mask is falling. So, but the conceptual utility extends to adult manipulative processes. So then their grooming tactics go over and over in their stages, from it's especially those involving in deception, boundary erosion, and dependency. So we have this codependency or interdependency, or something that the other partner, the vulnerable, cannot leave because they are overly depending on the aggressor. One stated that they become the abuser and the healer for the target. So they are the one who is causing the destruction and to confuse the target, and they look in the face of that they are the savior, or they are the one who's going to heal and save them from the crisis, even they are the one who caused the crisis. So that the two faces of the coin, to be the aggressor and the healer. So they take both roles. So that create the trauma, we call it trauma ponding, and normally of abusive behaviors. Word salad is semantic confusion and creating mental confusion. Word salad is a term more common in psychopathology, disorganized, schizophrenia, where speech is extremely disorganized, jumbled, and often lacks a coherent syntax or meaning. In the abuse manipulation context, in the term of metaphorically extended, the abuser may use disjointed, contradictory, or tangential speech patterns to confuse, derail, or overload the target's cognition. And overload, I read that it truly altered the neurofunction and structure. Imagine over time, cognitive overload, it's altered the neurofunction and structure. Using circular logic in non-sequesters or excessive qualifiers. Strategic semantic confusion serves to destabilize the target's confidence in their own reasoning. The abuser asserts contradictory statements, shifts frames mid the conversation, or refuses to anchor inconsistent meaning. There is no consistency. There is no consistency. So they overpromise and they confuse. This can cause the target to defer more to the abuser or freeze in uncertainty. So that is the central nervous system overwhelms the fight, is shifting from fight, flight to freeze response. It is the inability for decision making, and the confused state of mind. And this confusion tactics is closely allied with gaslighting, and this robbing the identity of the victim, robbing their identity. They add a sudden they tell to their therapists that I don't know who I am anymore. I don't know who I am standing in front of the mirror, or I am isolated from my family and friends, and I cannot go back to be the old me or the person I used to be. I didn't know who this person I am standing in front of. So that is dehumanizing and humiliating through the creation of God's within us. Um, so human crime can occur without a weapon, but as we say, pay attention to your words, because words can kill, words can compromise the human, words can dehumanize and humiliate and belittling and taking the dignity and integrity of human beings. So there are a lot of different dynamics. Would like to understand the psychology of personality traits and its impact on aggression and the compromise of the state of health and disease. Would like to understand that, especially when the goal is control, dominance, confusion, and uh, creating this destabilization in perception, in memory, in understanding, in clarity, in everything. So it is compromising a whole creature, not a whole creature, a whole human. Because the aggressor is being a creature, because we don't understand what mechanisms they, like the aliens, while the target, they are humans. Gaslighting, cognitive dissonance, and projection. Gaslighting is a term drawn from fiction, but widely adopted in clinical and anti-abuse discourse. It refers to attempts by the abuser to manipulate the target perception of reality, denying, minimizing, reframing, lying, misrepresenting facts to make the target doubt their memory, perception, and sanity. They question their sanity. So this is how they would like them to be perceived, that they are crazy, they are not, they are unstable, they are. So the labels start, and this they bring more psychosocial distress on the target. The aim is control, disorientation, and increase the dependency on the aggressor. Gaslighting often works via inducing a cognitive dissonance. The victim holds conflicting beliefs. I saw that happen, but he is saying it didn't happen. So they start to be in this state, and they start to question. And over time, okay, they will deny it to survive, deny to survive. The tension between them generates anxiety, and that is when we come from natural state to handle a task or a challenging task. The anxiety is as a healthy level, it create like dealing with ambiguity or a task like a stress response. So that is normal. But when it exceeded or prolonged over time, it become into the clinical manifestation, and it is physiological rather than it is only psychological. So the victim may then shift toward aligning with the abuser to reduce dissonance. Projection is a defense psychodynamic mechanism, and I remember, I think I studied it, and there are 12 psychological characteristics of the manifest that sublimation, when projection, and I stated it before in one of the videos, the 12 ones. And we see them based on early childhood trauma and the history from the family of origin and the adaptation or the maladaptive behavior mechanism of the survival brain. That is what is attracting that into adolescent, into adulthood, and then the attribution of their unacceptable impulses or thoughts or motives to the target, accusing the target of hostility, lying, betrayal, when the abuser is the one engaging in this. Projection is a component in many abusive dynamics. For example, you are the one being aggressive when the abuser initiated the situation, the manufactured situation. Manufactures means it is man designed, and they understand the timing, the pace, the place, and what are the outcomes. They are outcome seekers. Outcome seekers. A predatory brain or hunting, testing waters, luring. The notion of the predatory brain in this context is metaphorical but helpful. The abuser operates with a mindset analogs to the predator hunting prey. They may scan the vulnerability cues. They are studying. They are like the machine data collection. They are the old the modality of AI, the primitive modality of AI collecting information to generate designed patterns. So adapt, that is metaphorically I'm saying. So here, they may scan the vulnerability cues, adapt the tactics, test reactions, the threshold, escalate gradually. So they are in a constant state of escalation, not de-escalation, escalation. So they thrive on conflict. They thrive on division. They thrive on fight baits. They thrive on confusion. Imagine all of that. They are a lens of picking on these cues to use it for their advantage and for the disadvantage of the target. Retreat and re engage and tailor manipulation to the specific target personality. Testing waters refers to small boundary transgressions or soft props used by the abuser to see how the target reacts. Test and see, particularly in the grooming phase. They would like what ticks, what clicks, what make them react or respond in a certain way, so I can catch on that. Catch me if you can. So if the reaction is strong, unfortunately, it is tough. I don't say it's an easy. It's God's protection in this. However, witnessing it for years and decades, it became a personal responsibility to understand how can we elevate the God's purity within those who deserve to have a life with dignity and integrity, with awareness. Used by the abuser to see the target reacts. If the reaction is strong, the abuser may back off or adjust. They don't give up. They try and try and try and try and see what works, what does not work. It's like a study field. And the reaction is muted, they push further. Luring is analog to a predator's baiting, offering emotional reward, validation. So mimic the target psychological needs, psychosocial needs, emotional needs, physical needs, whatever it is. They would like to understand it so they can understand how to break this. Validation or psychological safety to bring the victim closer into dependency or lower defense before switching to more manipulative or controlling modes. Do they use the naivety and the gullibility and the easy to trust attitudes of the target? Absolutely, absolutely. And this is like a soft ice cream for them to 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 bite. So yeah, absolutely. Modern abusive dynamics increasingly exploit digital tools because, as I said, it's now with more education, with more people aware. But however, if you learn it in a school, you understand, yeah, this is that and that. But when it comes in human nature, in the blood and flesh, it presents itself because we study the abstract, we study the text, we study the facts, but they are not included within the blood and flesh and the emotional side of manipulation. And that is a whole different school. There's a whole different school. If you study the emotional tapestry and formula from the aggressor and the target, both are different dynamics. What the aggressor feeds on, it is not, it is the target needs or deficiency or their early childhood trauma. What lacks and how to break this. They are not interested in the person, they are interested in what they are feeding on, what the target is presenting them. It's a new delicious meal to feed on. So this is how they would like to thrive on harm, to thrive on this manipulative nature of behaviors. So through social media, abusers may surveil or triangulate, gaslight, compare life events, or spread rumors like the smear campaigns. So they redirect the public into the perception of the target as they are the problem and they are the one everybody needs to pay attention to take care, to be aware of them, to avoid, to not to. So that is part of the isolation and grooming. Isolating the target, that is a whole different scenario to isolate the target because they are going to be more guardless and more easy to break down. They may use likes, posts, or indirect references, selective sharing, or ghosting to manipulate the emotional states of the target. As I said, they can make a fake profile. Imagine you are, you, and this is driven by analytics. If they study the analytics, what you like, what you mostly press like, what is your comments, what is your struggle, what is your frustration, what is your complaints on this, you're going to see your page is changing based on the information you presented, and they can present themselves in fake profiles, and they can look legit. They can look, oh, this is the person, or this is the organization, or this is, oh my goodness, I like it. But you do know that is one of the predator tactics, just to keep eye on what are you doing on the digital realm to influence. Digital media also allows the abuser to study the target, glean vulnerabilities, habits, communication styles, social connections. They feed on your social connection. They would like to know who you are in contact with, who you are in close relationship with, and they try to impact this to break down the circle of support. So information that can inform strategic targeting, because social media interaction leave often persistent traces. They can also be weaponized, screen capture, public shaming, controlling online narrative. So they use emotional manipulation, fear, helplessness, and confusion. These are part of the breaking down, the distorted reality, the fragmented self, the self doubt, break the trust, bring this fear and helplessness for dependency. So these are the emotional levers that abusers seek to press. Emotional manipulation can involve guilt, shame, conditional love, threats, implicit or explicit. Shame, induction, triangulation, competition, and intermittent reinforcement, occasional reward, and among intermittent reinforcement. That is one of the tactics. Yes, one of the therapists or the psychotherapists that stated that they shower them with gifts and then put them in hardship, shower them with good words, and then put them in hardships. So they are going to be the aggressor or the punisher and the healer at the same time. So that is trauma bonding. So the victim become so attached to them, trying to survive by agreeing with whatever is presented to them. The emotional climate of fear, helplessness, and confusion foster a trauma bond in which the victim may feel similarly repulsed and pulled toward the abuser. This started to be attached, and this is one of the disorganized attachment, part of it, that they want to feel that they belong, they are loved, somebody, they are needed by somebody. So this sense of deprivation of a sense of belonging and love and attention, and that even it comes with a price, even it is torturing them over time. They said they don't see any way out of this vicious cycle, trying to regain agency or subjectivity, be stuck in this dynamic. Vulnerability, identity confusion. A central aim of abusive tactics is to exploit vulnerability, whether emotional, like past trauma, insecurities, cognitive uncertainty, low self-esteem. So normally they work on the opposite what you project. If you are projecting, for example, the need for approval, they are gonna present you with rejection, because this is what breaks it down, the insecurities, the need for approval, the need of acceptance. That is why are going to present to the opposite of that, what you are projecting. Are you projecting acceptance, approval, whatever you are projecting, they are going to present you with the opposite, because this is how they cause frustration, fear, helplessness, and they break down this castle they wanna they wanna break. So, or this task that the mission accomplished. And on the another thing, like a cognitive, like uncertainty or low self-esteem, if the person is lacking confidence, so they're going to blame that. Social, so they are going to present you with support and then withdraw, support and then withdraw. So you are going to be in this state of confusion. What is going on here? Breaking down identity and reality. So social, the main goal is isolating the target and no interaction within their trusted circle. Structure like economic dependency, and this is what the research has a lot of studies on that. Over time, the victim identity, sense of self, autonomy, boundaries may become fragmented. They didn't know what to do anymore. That's inhibition of decision making. They may internalize the abuser's narrative, so they are gonna put everything that the shame, guilt, and the responsibility of what's happening, because they are not worthy, they are not deserving it, or oh my goodness, yes, I am overreactive, I am overdoing it. No, I shouldn't do that. I wouldn't do that. I shoulda, coulda, woulda. I call it shoulda, coulda, woulda. But this, I can trust my own mind. So they are going to present this narrative, internalize their inner value or worth, that they are not measuring up or not enough or not worthy of it, or that they are the problem. This agrees with what the aggressor would like them to believe, that they are the problem. This erosion of identity is frequently accompanied by confusion, self-doubt, dissociation, hypervigilance, especially with children, and because they don't, their central nervous system is overwhelmed. It is taking a lot of information that they cannot understand or process, and their biological system, because they are into this, for example, the neurodevelopmental sensitive periods. So there are changes in their brain function and structure, and then later on their puberty and their hormonal changes, their sleep cycle, their circadian rhythm, or their biological clock function. So all of this is taking a load onto their biosystem and the gut-brain axis, and so that is increasing the hyperactivity and increasing the excitotoxic ratio, leading to the, as I say, manufactured the human behavior, they leading to dysfunction and dysregulation, and leading to impulsivity and hypervigilance. Shame, this is shame, guilt, fear. That is their core primitive emotions that they are working in to compromise the human brain and depend on the reptilian mammalian brain. The need of bonding, the codependency, and the hypervigilance, or the reactive reactions. Let us go again for, I would like to present the temperament theory. The temperament theory. So the temperament is part of your biological trait. So who you are. Temperament is a broadly stable, biologically rooted set of individuals, differences in reactivity, self-regulation, emotional style. A temperament interacts with environment, goodness of the fit, so the survival of the fittest. The biological laws to shape personality and vulnerability to psychopathology. In abusive context, a person with certain temperament traits like high sensitivity, high reactivity, low emotional regulation capacity may be more vulnerable to manipulation and exploitation. The abuser may read or test the temperament to optimize their tactics. So one of the key other, they work on guilt, fear, shame. They work on identifying your temperament. They have higher sensitivity to others pushing boundaries or crossing boundaries, higher activity, low, or for example, they may present unwanted behavior, socially unwanted. Are you going to tolerate that? If you are going to tolerate that, that will give them a green card to cross boundary, because you haven't reacted, or you smiled, or you laughed. So that is agreement with what they want to then label as crossing boundaries. Low emotional regulation capacity may be more vulnerable to manipulate or exploitation, I said. Interpersonal abuse, and I said one of the unhealthy interpersonal relationships, it shapes a lot how you perceive relationships, the pattern of selecting your relationships, and the pattern of, or the type or the nature of relationships is going to manifest in your life. So whatever your understanding about relationship shaped from early childhood is gonna impact over stages, and that is the maladaptive, the survival brain to feel belong, to feel fit, but it comes at expense for distorted identities. Interpersonal abuse, especially chronic or developmental, constitutes a form of traumatic stress. Trauma exerts effects at the molecular, cellular, circuit, and system levels. So, molecular psychiatry studies have shown that exposure to stress or trauma can alter gene expression, epigenetic markers, neurotransmitter systems, synaptic plasticity, and here is plasticity, how the neural synaptics can connect with each other and communicate with each other. Or there is strong synaptic connection, or there is a weakened synaptic connection. Is there ability to rewire new synaptic or new regions or circuitries of the brain to compensate or to be integrated in certain behaviors. The ability of the brain to adapt and to evolve and to expand its capacity of absorbing more information in processing, information processing, how this impact the intercellular signaling, glucocorticoid signaling, immune inflammatory cascades. This is all from Girjandi. I'll review on molecular effects of traumatic stress. In PTSD and trauma-exposed brains, changes are observed in the amygdala, hippocampus, and prefrontal cortex, including medial prefrontal cortex in terms of functional connectivity, dendritic remodeling, inhibitory excitatory balance, and fear extension circuits, impairment in prefrontal cortex inhibition over the amygdala. That is, we see reviews in the literature on brain circuit dysfunction in PTSD. For example, chronic stress can reduce brain-derived neurotropic factor, or BDNF, that is a neuromodulator, impair synaptic plasticity, shrink dendritic alperizations in the hippocampus, and disrupt the glutamatergic or GABA signaling. And you see the literature in the National Institute of Health, the the Library of Medicine, I think so, the Library of Medicine. In human post-mortem and imaging studies, PTSD brains show alterations in gene networks, especially interneuron-related transcripts. Dysregulation of inhibitory interneurons signalings and cell type-specific transcription reorganization. For example, SST in interneurons in frontal regions, differences in interneuron transcriptions in PTSD, and that is we can see it as well in the. I'm gonna write it down. I'm gonna write it down. Um, uh, Here is here. So if we like would like to back up our like understanding from the literature, from the studies has been done in specific field of, for example, in PTSD and the impact of abuse and trauma on the brain. There is a lot of studies is going to be presented. So I am this impact that is PTSD. Yeah. So I am that's now filtered. Yes, a lot. And this is part of one that approaches the future psychiatry focus. Because it requires a lot of understanding why we reach this state of lack of understanding, confusion. So these other Yes, yes, yes. Um, this is part of it. Is that is forensic. That's part of the forensic. So how physical abuse can. uh, it is easy to talk about it. However, whoever going through this dynamic is not easy, and it does compromise the biological system of individual, and it is based on their age, gender, race, ethnicity, demographic, geographic, all these factors. It impacts all manifestation, but the body keeps the score. So that's why we would like to, because sometimes it is easy to judge, it is easy to throw words at one another. However, uh, with the biological manifestation, it leaves its mark and its prints, and every person is having a lot already. So but it is increased with the experiences, with the type of life they are having across their lifespan, and we are reaping the price already. We are reaping the price already, if we understand it. Let me see the latest how can I get that? So the latest statistics about so let's see that. So that is from the CDC. These are trends in multiple chronic conditions among adults by life stage behavior risk factors surveillance. That is from 2013, because it takes a decade, to 20 to 23. I'm gonna share this as well. You are gonna see exactly a snapshot where we are in the state of health and disease. And that is, and we understand that CDC is going through a lot of changes right now, and we would like only to understand. Okay, so what we need to do here, what is our role? It is a partnership. It is not only one person or one organization responsibility to protect, to prevent. Every human has a part to play, and how we can identify our role in that, and how can we encourage other to learn. And um, like 15 years ago, my state was like helpless, and no solution or anything like that. However, it came to a state that it has been. That's why I went back to school, and I said I want to be a friend for my condition. I wanna, instead of hating on that friend, because that is what happens when we are challenged with something that has no name, has no diagnosis, but you every time you are being given a diagnosis, you are being given, but you don't understand that this is a immune response. So how come we start with the composition of the central nervous system, immune response, and stress response to understand the whole person? How can we change the culture from that? It started from simple. It is not, and then if it is ignored, it is complicated. It is complex. It started the person take the condition as their identity, and they started to identify themselves as it is, not knowing that their molecular tapestry is changing every single day. So you are made for change. You are not made for stagnation, a static state of numbers or outcomes. You are changing. So, what is your role in this change? Is it good or is it not good? You have to understand your responsibility. That will evolve you as a human and will as well integrate the part that is neglected, that the neocortex and the prefrontal cortex. And when it is loaded with more cortisol, adrenaline, and this reactive biochemistry, that harm done benefit the quality of life. So how can we shift that? How we can shift that to say, I have a role to play, but this role, I'm not going to harm others or myself, but I'm going to start to befriend why my body, why I am thinking that way, and why my body react that way. And does it serve you? Does it serve you? It's an important question. So now there is a need for longitudinal molecular genetic integration studies in trauma exposed individuals. So um, to reveal or explain or understand the driver causal genes implicated in PTSD and major depressive disorder divergence and stress response. So, for example, ESR1, RUNX1, PPARA, WWOX, integration of peripheral transcriptomimetic in PTSD. Notably, repeated trauma may lead to cumulative molecular scars. The body keep the scores. It does over time for oxidative stress cause lesions. So higher stress, high abuse cause lesions. So as if this is like the body is eating itself. So epigenetic changes, stable shifts in gene regulation, alter the network of connectivity and increase the vulnerability to future stressors. The brain may accumulate trauma in the sense that successive insult leave traces, epigenetic charges in the ILZ gene related to glucocorticoid signaling, that is cortisol. Overreactive cortisol is not okay. The interplay of resiliency and serotonin resistance as well, or oversensitivity, is not okay. The interplay of resilience versus susceptibility is also important. In animal stress model, molecular signature, lipidome, transcriptome, and microbiome differentiate individuals, the differentiation factors. I have it. You have lipid profile, they have microbiome profile that is coming, who show maladaptive versus resilient responses to trauma over time. Trauma do not break all brains equally. It depends on the susceptibility and your genotype phenotype interaction. When abuse or trauma occurs during developmentally sensitive periods of childhood, adolescence, the impact may be more profound. Interference with normative synaptogenesis, pruning, myelination, circuit formation, stress regulation, and systems like HB axis. And I did the other video on HB axis and the SAM axis in modulation. This is one dysfunction. This is part of neurodevelopmental models of psychopathology. The traumagenic neurodevelopmental model of psychosis linked childhood trauma to later psychotic symptoms via altered stress sensitivity, neurodevelopmental disruption, and increased vulnerability to dysregulated perception and cognition as well. Cross-culturally, the expression, interpretation, and the social meaning of identity, emotional regulation, and interrelation norms vary. Thus, how abuse is perceived, resisted, or internalized depend on partially on culture templates, shame cultures, collectivist orientations, relational norms. Cultural factors may modulate vulnerability or resilience, shape identity as victim or survivals, and influence whether certain exploitative tactics are socially legitimized or hidden. So either these tactics will be over time normalized as a culture norm, such a culture norm, or is gonna be hidden. It's, nobody can already have this radar that detect this abusive behaviors. So identify formation under abuse is especially complex. Victims may internalize multiple conflict narratives. I say what narrative is presented. That is why we would like to understand the narrative instead understanding of symptoms only. Those of the abusers, the victim's self-perception, social stigma, culture rules, and may develop dissociated or fragmented identity processing, especially in under prolonged trauma, so over prolonged. So, for example, we have a heuristic model. This is the familiar, the relevant, or familiar or easy. What's known, what is familiar. The abuser behavior space. The abuser functions as a strategic agent, predator, who scans for vulnerabilities, tests boundaries, adapts tactics over time, escalates or retreats, insulates from detections, and frames narratives. Their toolkit may include deception, gaslighting, projection, baiting, grooming, semantic confusion, triangulation, surveillance, or digital abuse. Target vulnerabilities and reactions. The victim brings temperament, trait, reactivity, inhibition, emotional regulation, self esteem, developmental history, identity schema, trauma residues, social support network, cognitive reserve. When abused, they may react sometimes emotionally or defensively. So they are reactive, become confused, doubt themselves, shift identity, disassociate, or internalize shame and guilt. So they are unworthy or they deserve it. Cognitive emotional friction through gaslighting, cognitive dissonance, semantic confusion, and reactive abuse framing. The abusers seek to place the victim in a bind, to doubt their own perceptions, to choose between two conflicting meanings, to lose footing, disorientation. The emotional climate of fear, helplessness, and confusion further deepens the compliance and dependence. Neurobiological embedding as abuse is chronic or intense. A stress response system, HB axis, autonomic nervous system, are chronically engaged over time. Molecular, cellular, and circuit level changes occur. Synaptic remodeling, inhibitory excitatory balance shifts, altered gene expression, epigenetic changes, and network reorganization. These changes may reduce cognitive flexibility, heighten hypervigilance, impair emotion regulations, and make disengagement from the abuser harder. Self-identity effects with ongoing manipulation, the victim's sense of self may fragmented or erode. So they don't know themselves anymore. They may lose trust in their own judgment. This inhibition of decision making, adopt internalized narrative of fault and guilt and incompetence, and become more enmeshed. The relational identity, the abuser frame, can shadow or subsume the victim self. Cultural developmental modulation, the dynamics are modulated by the culture context, norms about authority, relationship roles, the shame and honor culture, developmental timing, childhood versus adulthood onset. But if they are primed, if they are positioned, if they are conditioned, it goes with them. It manifests in their interpersonal relationships, their communication style, everything, and how they relate to others. And resilience factors, social support, therapy, personality, prior coping skills. Let us see, many of the terms like predatory brain or word salad in abuse originate partly in popular psychology, in pop psychology or advocacy discourse, rather than strictly in peer-reviewed clinical neuroscientific literature. Their use should be carefully operationalized if used in research or clinical writing. Causality direction, it is often challenging to disentangle the cause versus effect in abuse trauma research, where vulnerability features present before abuse or induced by it. So this is like from the clinical investigation. So do they have them? Because if they are primed, conditioned, and positioning for it from early age, it is a continuation of neglected or ignored or unaddressed trauma and abuse. So longitudinal perspectives of design are rare but critical. So it is sensitive area to discuss, and how to address it collectively. That is what the perspective of the future approaches to heal as community. So this means when the intervention, how to be designed and planned according to the community needs. And it is shown from needs assessment, community needs assessment, part of it. Heterogeneity, not all victims respond identically. Some show resilience, other develop PTSD, dissociative disorders, depression, personality alteration, and the manifestation of the disorders, it varies from one person to the other. The biological tapestry is different from person to the other. Cross-cultural generalization, many neuroscientific studies are done in Western population. It is risky to generalize molecular mechanisms or normative ranges across diverse culture, ethnic groups without caution, especially for populations like African Americans, Hispanic, and Native Americans. So they have to be approaches completely different because they have a tapestry or a biological makeup. It can be differ from the white European, for example. So it is completely different, and the type of trauma is different, and the type of the environment is different, and the development, neurodevelopmental, all of these aspects are very complex. That's why you have to address what is really highly can be targeted as an intervention or a discourse of action. Ethical and conceptual balance. We must avoid metaphoric overreach, calling all abusers predators in like in a forensic sense, or it came from the mammalian kingdom, because you see the predator and the prey. So that is what is activating the reptilian or the neocortex. What is activating in this scenario right now, or the mammalian one? A biological determinism, though victims' brain are inversely damaged with no plasticity, the brain maintains plasticity, and with intervention therapy such as support, reparative or compensatory processes are possible. So, because your body is designed to compensate, to try to navigate and shape new circuitry, shape new connections, all of that, that is your body is protecting you and trying to help you survive. So we have to focus today on behavioral and interpersonal tactics like baiting, provocation, reactive abuse, grooming, luring, incremental boundary erosion, semantic confusion, gaslighting, projection, digital and social media based manipulation, vulnerability. They use temperamental traits and emotional regulation capacity, prior trauma, developmental history, identity, the play on identity, self-concept, and social support. So in trauma and abuse, we have to embed the molecular, genetic, epigenetic effects of traumatic stress, drawn from the molecular psychiatry. Circuit level dysfunction, amygdala, hippocampus, prefrontal cortex, long-term brain remodeling, resilience versus susceptibility, developmental timing, and cross-culture modulation. They work on fear, helplessness, confusion, and cognitive dissonance, shaping the fragmented identity, dissociation, shame, internalization, trauma bonding, loyalty conflict, gaslighting, induced doubt. So the like for example, the intervention will be like trauma focused therapy, cognitive restructuring, and narrative therapy. We have to form the narrative, and the shaping the narrative from lived experiences. That is a new perspective is still not fully in the clinical practical form. It's still research based. So shaping the narrative, what narrative is presented. So that is a holistic approach. So see beyond the veil. See beyond the veil. Neuroscience informed intervention, reconsolidation therapy, neuromodulation. The gaps that is seeking the perspective abuse to brain trajectories, cross-culture validation, manipulation detection training. How can I be manipulation detective? So how that it takes a focus and attention, so you have to understand it. So this doesn't feel right, and when your insights say this feel right, it doesn't feel right, because whatever is healthy, whatever is nurturing, whatever is natural, it brings peace and safety, sense of safety of it. It brings like unquestionable trust with it, sense of safety, sense of trust, sense of being seen as you are, not being judged for somebody other projection onto you. So that's the whole difference. So we have to have this integrative modalities. We have to consider ethics in these modalities. We are not perpetrating privacy, confidentiality, and we are exposing their vulnerability and causing more psychological distress. So we have to identify these ethical considerations from practitioners, survivors, and researchers. So the researcher is the observer, is trying to understand the phenomena, to present a perspective about the narrative of the condition. Practitioner is we have a set of psychometrics, we have lab work, we have even these are used in research based on the baseline of the trajectory of the manifestation of the narrative and why the what is going on here. For the survival, we have are they able to voice their stories? Are they are able in a safe and trusted environment and are able to feel this psychological safety in being vulnerable and being exposed to their vulnerability? Are they going to be believed? Are they going to find the support that is going to be integrated within their healing and recovery journey? So that is a whole consideration to be of a matter of thought as the community is healing culture throughout when you for example we say reactive abuse gaslighting, how the lay person identify that, what tools that they can be presented with to identify them, how they can put the lens of the detective and the investigator of what does not feel normal or not is dehumanizing their and compromising their dignity and integrity as humans, how they can define it, how they can portray it, how they can present a narrative that keep cohesive, not fragmented. How they can understand that their vulnerability impacted their brain, how they understand and what this mean from a health and disease perspective. What does it mean of this happen into their neurofunction structure and the mechanisms of their electrophychemistry? What this mean? What this mean in their functionality over ages? That is a whole different perspective in understanding culture health and healing culture. So new narrative needs to be presented open-minded. The taboos to voice and have self-efficacy and advocate and rise up to the state of human is God-given right. He doesn't give you to this life to be humiliated or fragmented. It's not God's will. Chronic interpersonal abuse engages stress response systems and over time leads to synaptic remodeling, altered inhibitory excitatory balance, as I said before. So it has its impact how they understand the glutamatergic, the serotonergic, the GABAergic, all these pathways and their impact and their allostatus and excitotoxicity, what they mean. I'd like us to say to add as well, psychological manipulation involves behavior designed to control, confuse, or exploit another person, often resulting in emotional distress, identity fragmentation, and trauma. These behaviors include aggression, gaslighting, grooming, baited fights, and digital surveillance. So we have to understand that aggression may be overt, like verbal or physical, or covert, passive aggression or threats. Cunning behaviors involve calculated, deceited, often intended, that is intentional, to mislead or trap targets. That is to cause this disorientation and shaking of their reality and the shock. The shock. They cannot believe it or what's going on, self-doubt and self-distortion. Baited fights occur intentionally, provokes a reaction. Reactive abuse target emotional outbursts, which abuser reframe as unprovoked aggression. For the psychological grooming, they targeting vulnerability, gaining trust, desensitization, and manipulating perception and scarcity. You will never, you will never, you will never. This is common in abusive relationships and often leads to trauma bonding. So the narrative of the or the abuser narrative, we have to um, the the victim often internalize this narrative. They bring it into themselves, and it impacted their perception of the reality and how they feel. It lacks the validation of their feelings. So it includes emotional manipulation and psychological impact, fear, helplessness, and confusion. Feeling helpless in the face of contradiction or shifting blame, becoming confused about what is real, experiencing fear that provokes a compliance or silence. In some cultures, they promote the silence yeah, behavior, because if they speak up, they will be harmed or something. They are going to be perceived that they are the problem, or they are unstable or crazy. So no one will believe them. So that is the trajectories. Vulnerability factors include attachment issues, low self-esteem, and trauma history. And that is what is being used. In using of social media, surveil their target, triangulate with others. So they have a collision, create jealousy or isolation, study patterns of communication and emotional expression. Pay attention of the fake profiles. It's easy to be trapped in that. So there is, as I say, selective sharing, passive aggressive posts, and indirect comments can be used to distort the perception. Cyber stalking, ghosting, and breadcrumbing are common digital behaviors in abusive dynamics. Temperament traits related to abusive vulnerability: high sensitivity, low frustration tolerance, high emotional reactivity, low assertiveness. So what is the impact on HB axis? Elevated cortisol level, reduced brain-derived neurotrophic factor, BDNF, increased the neuroinflammation. And that is, you're going to see it all study on any lab work in any manifestation of any condition. That is the basics. Elevated cortisol level, reduce the brain derived neurotropic factors, increase the neuroinflammation, altered synaptic plasticity, especially adolescent and young adults, because of this vulnerability of pruning and hormonal changes. We have, as I said, the changes in the amygdala, threat detection, hippocampus, memory and context, prefrontal cortex, executive function, emotion regulation. This is the break. For the epigenetic and trauma, DNA methylation of stress regulation gene changes happen, chemical changes happen in the DNA expression. It changes in gene expression related to mood and cognition. Neurodevelopmental cross-cultural considerations, developmental timing, Abuse has its impact on childhood and adolescence in disruption in synaptogenesis, myelination, cortical pruning, leads to increased risk of PTSD, depression, and personality disorders. Cross-cultural perspectives, the collective society may suppress confrontation, leading to internalized trauma, so they are not worthy, and this shaming, guilt, and fear. Honor culture may blame victim, exaggerate shame. Um, so it impact it's a psychiatric manifestation: hyper arousal, intrusive memories, emotional numbness or avoidance, associated with emotional dysregulation, fear of abandonment, identity disturbances, history of relational trauma. For example, for dissociative disorders, memory loss, depersonalization, identity fragmentation. Prolonged abuse and grooming, especially in childhood, are strong risk factors in distortion of reality in just child and adolescents, and that make them more susceptible for other abusers or other type of abuse or aggression. So, psychological manipulation, particularly in chronic abusive context, produce significant emotional and cognitive and neurological harm. Tactics such as gaslighting, grooming, and repeated fights are not only psychologically destructive but may induce longer-term molecular and circuit-level changes in the brain. An interdisciplinary approach merging behavior psychology, trauma theory, molecular neuroscience, and sociocultural analysis is essential to fully understand and counteract these dynamics. Temperament, how temperament is present like individual differences in emotional and motor and attentional reactivity and self-regulation. For example, negative affectivity, fear, frustration, sadness. Extroversion, urgency, like activity level, approach, high intensity or pleasure. Effortful control, attention, focus, inhibitory control. Temperament traits have a direct link to abusive vulnerability. So the abuser has to understand what type of temperament traits you possess, so they understand how to beat on that. Children with certain temperamental, and especially within children and adolescents, what they are really famous for: when you say no, they push back, but we don't know who they are communicating with and how they are going to perceive their pushback. Or later on, the adolescents, how they maladaptively use this pushback to manipulate others. So that is a whole different dynamic of the behavior when I understand the narrative, when this behavior started to manifest. What environment, what triggers, what scenarios, what neurocognitive schemas that are presented within the narrative of the behavior. So we have here high negative affectivity, more likely to experience distress, and may appear difficult, which can increase conflict in caregiver relationships. low effortful control, difficulty in emotion regulation and boundary setting, increasing risk of victimization. High reactivity and low adaptability may be targeted for grooming or coercive control due to struggle with social cues and assertiveness. So, what you project to the abuser, that is what they are going to use. So you have to ask yourself what behaviors I am projecting in the environment I am in, and how this impact me, negative or positive. Red flags: excessive fear, for example. We see early behavior indicators that warrant support include excessive fear or withdrawal in novel social situations, potential fear of authority figures, or hypervigilance. So, how the body responds in the presence of specific group or people or personalities. How the body, pay attention to that, especially in child and adolescents. High irritability or emotional out process inconsistent with environmental stimuli, possible overactivation of stress systems, poor impulses control and attention issues, which may mask a deeper anxiety or trauma response. Increased sensitivity to criticism or rejection, possibly signaling early emotional invalidation or trauma conditioning. So these cues or these projections, this is what the abusers pick upon and use. So we would like to adopt the early coaching approach on sensitive and attuned caregiving, emotional regulation training for children through mindfulness and some therapeutic approaches to understand the how to tune into their body and understand what their body is telling them. Is it in a comfortable, relaxed, rested state, or it is in anxious, fearful, um, unstable state, and why, and what presented in this scenario. Temperament informed the classroom temperament, say the predators or the aggressor is picking on this, understanding the triggers and understand the sensitivity, understand the tolerability and everything and like that, and they are picking on this fast, such as quiet zones, breaks, or social emotional learning. Neurobiological effects of childhood abuse, like from neurodevelopmental trajectories that the traumatized brain structure reduce the volume in the hippocampus, corpus callosum, and prefrontal cortex. Function: hyperactivity in the amygdala, impaired connectivity in emotion regulation circuits. Neurochemistry: dysregulation in dopamine, serotonin, and stress hormones, cortisol. So the effects of that creates PTSD, depression and anxiety, dissociative symptoms, borderline personality disorders. The red flags: chronic hypervigilance, scanning for danger, exaggerated startle response, developmental aggression, loss of tolerating or language skills, dissociation, zoning out, confusion about events or time, emotional numbing or flat affect despite age appropriate stimuli. How they respond, and this can be uh, as I said, it can be used for or against the individual, unfortunately. So it is important to train educators and pediatricians to recognize trauma-linked behaviors. That is not misbehavior, that is a trauma response. So how can we see the behavior from the lens of trauma response? So we'd like to evaluate the trauma on the pathophysiological method, not only psychological, emotional. Incorporating safe relationships and consistent routines into therapeutic settings, using play, narrative, or somatic therapies and to restore emotional and neural regulation, caregiver education about the long-term impacts of emotional neglect, not just physical abuse. So some red flags for professionals and caregivers to pay attention to: patterns of shutdown or aggression inconsistent with typical developmental temperaments, rapid shifts in behavior or affect, especially when around specific individuals or environment. The body, the brain pick the cues, especially the visual ones, and then the trauma memory, the body takes over. Difficulty distinguishing fantasy from reality or extreme idealization, demonization of others. Reluctance to disclose personal experiences despite clear signs of distress. Both temperament theory and neurobiological research stress the agency of early identification and response. While some children may have biological predisposition that increase their sensitivity, the presence of nurturing relationships and early therapeutic support can buffer these risks and promote resilience. Integrating these conceptual facts or findings in educational healthcare parenting frameworks allows for proactive interventions long before manipulation or chronic abuse create lasting neurodevelopmental scars. That is a change in electropyochemistry, not only, but in the neurofunction and structure and lesions in the brain. Temperament, as proposed by Rothbard and Bates 2006, reflects early phenotypic expression of underlying genetic predisposition, observable throughout traits such as emotional reactivity, self-regulation, and sociability. However, genotype environment interaction are important in shaping how these temperamental traits interact with exposure to abuse and neglect. For example, I have 5-HTTLPR serotonin transporter gene polymorphism. Individuals with the short allele have been found to exhibit higher emotional reactivity, particularly in negative context, making them more sensitive to stress and trauma. D4 or dopamine receptor gene, the 7 repeat allele, have been associated with increased novelty seeking and impulsivity traits that may lead to boundary testing, behavior, and social conflict. So that is one of the red flags as well that can shift into antisocial personality disorders. COMT or catechol O methyl transferase and VAL 158 MET polymorphism influence dopamine breakdown in the prefrontal cortex, impacting executive function and emotional control. Red flags for 5-HTTLPRSS may be more affected by adverse environments. It can show in mood dysregulation, heightened separation anxiety, difficulty adapting to changes in routine, persistent somatic complaints like stomach aches, headaches. So it presents somatosensory dysregulation of somatosensory regulation. So or function. Such children require early emotional regulation support and safe attachment environments, especially in settings where manipulation or coercive control may go unnoticed. Emotionally unavailable or punitive caregiver. One of the some of the biomarkers I stated is cortisol, that's HB axis. That is due to prolonged stress exposure, BDNF, synaptic plasticity and memory learning, low level linked to depression, impaired neurogenesis, interleukin 6 and tumor necrosis factor alpha, neuroinflammation, immune function, elevated in abused children linked to anxiety and depression, DNA methylation patterns like NR3C1 gene, and these are repetitive biomarkers I'm saying over and over. Epigenetic silencing of glucocorticoid receptor expression alters the stress reactivity and emotional regulation. We have amygdala hypertrophy, overactive, heightened fear response and emotional lability, reduced hippocampal volume, memory, and contextual processing deficits, prefrontal cortex thinning, impaired decision making, and impulse control. Uh, so we have see here high emotional reactivity, low effortful control, high novelty seeking. That are the patterns correlated with short allele of 5-HTT-LBR, DRD4 7 repeat allele, COMT, MET or VL variations, elevated baseline cortisol, low BDNF, high inflammatory markers, trauma-linked DNA methylation, NR3C1 promoter regions, hypervigilance, fearfulness, so aggression or withdrawal, dissociation or emotional numbing, self-injuries, behavior or somatic symptoms. So for the environmental screening, inconsistent caregiving, exposure to psychological manipulation, gaslighting, grooming, and coercion, presence of emotional invalidation or neglect. So there are a lot of I said ethical considerations for biomarker and genotype, but hopefully it is coming in the new version of DSM. So hopefully you understand that, because law and ethics are really heightened, because many are scared to, oh, what happened if a person knew this about the child or the adolescents? How come I prevent harm? And that is a whole another issue. And that is another exposure to understand the dynamic that, or the complete narrative taking place. And when informations are presented, or information presented, the response or the handling or the responsibility to take with this knowledge is gonna bring a different trajectory of group dynamic, human dynamic, and interpersonal relationships. But we would like to know the facts. We'd like to understand. This will present practitioners with ethical. Sometimes when they are presented with that very highly alert, like the dark traits, sometimes it is plugged from the other side to know, and unfortunately it present like guilt. It present why not, why I was not told or informed, or nobody told me, and this is going to present another psychological distress in which escalate the situation. So how to be handled, that is another a narrative or another scenario or another discipline is going to be presented to practitioners, to survivors, to who are involved in the care of the person, how to handle it with responsibility and for the common good of healing and restoration and prevent harm. Potential stigmatization as well of children are labeled as genetically vulnerable. What this vulnerable? Vulnerable means I am available for the predator. So it gives a sense of helplessness. So the lack of self-efficacy and their inability to handle what is coming, because that is the biological tapestry of me. It's no one how we shift that you are not your genes, that your biology is ever evolving and changing, but it needs the tools, it needs the habits, it needs other things to be infused within the lifestyle changes, within the environment, within the interpersonal dynamic, within the social support, how to present the meaning of healthy community, healthy society, healthy individuals, healthy relationships. How can we present that? That is the language of health. That is the language of healing. So I am presenting another tapestry of them. How to as long as I am presenting the scenarios, how to identify the red flags, and I'm presenting how, what does it mean by healthy. If the person hasn't been exposed to healthy relationships, how come they know? They will normalize every abusive as the norm. Any relationships abused is the norm. So they are not breaking the cycle, and they are repeating those vicious cycles and intergenerational trauma and the predisposition for disease and illnesses. So how can we present this new language of health? What does it mean by health? Equitable access to early testing and trauma informed care. So, how can we shift this? Because I say that in your clinic and your practitioner, you have a specific time, you have a specific number of visitation or intervention or eligibility based on your insurance and what based on what's not, what is out of the pocket. It bring another psychological distress, responsibility, and burden to the individuals. So how can we change a culture into empowering individuals to build healthy model of interpersonal relationships from early age? Biomarkers use should support and not replace clinical judgment and trauma-informed approaches. So they are a guide, because I have to address it. What rupture has occurred? So the physiological or the psychopathological the physiopathological markers or features or manifestations, they present to me with what better modalities. Is it medication? Is it a therapeutic intervention, or is it integration of both? So what is needed, or there is alternative, especially with resistant treatment resistant. What are complementary and alternative models? So to expand the modality of treatment and the options, and empower the individual with hope and presenting with solutions, not hindering their ability to heal, or they have a part in their journey of healing. In the integration of temperament theory, genotype, phenotype dynamics, and trauma related biomarkers offer a powerful lens of identifying children, adolescents at risk for long term neuropsychiatric consequences. Early detection of red flags, therefore, emotional, behavior, biological, environmental, can prevent chronic dysfunction and support resilience by unifying research from molecular psychiatry, developmental psychology, neurobiology. Professional can create early intervention systems tailored to the complex realities of trauma exposed individuals. So we have another tool of assessment that calls the DISC assessment, DISC. So what it stands for? So D is for dominance, So the traits presented, this is one of the tools for personality traits. And where are you from? And what does it mean? So D is dominance, assertive, competitive, result driven. Result driven. We see this in like personality A behaviors, for example. They lack control and outcomes, and at the same time, it's in cluster personality A and B. So we can see this competitiveness and control and outcomes. So dominance. So it can present the negative dark traits and the competitive personality type personality A behavior. So which one? There are um, a screening for that. So influence I, sociable, expressive, persuasive, relationship and recognition. Steadfastness, that is S, patient, reliable, supportive, stability and harmony. Consciousness, analytical, detail oriented, rule following. That's accuracy and correctness. And sometimes D, target C. So let's see that. That is, it's not healthy dynamic. It's not a healthy dynamic between D and C. So we understand this. It is not an assessment or a measure for mental health, but it can be utilized in workplace dynamics, relationship behavior, leadership training, and therapeutic insight into personality-driven responses to stress or manipulation. So DISC is used for behavior susceptibility and DISC profile. Certain DISC types may be more vulnerable to emotional manipulation, gaslighting, and coercion, especially if placed in toxic or power imbalance environments. For D, assertive or independent, so maybe provoked into reactive abuse, resist control, which may escalate conflict. I, charismatic, trusting, may overlook red flags, easily groomed through praise or flattery. S, loyal, peace seeking, avoids the conflict, easily manipulated by guilt or obligation. So they are overworked. S. C, rule abiding, analytical, may question the reality, gaslighting, vulnerable to confusion through word salad or inconsistency. They play on their vulnerability. Red flag, a manipulator might love bomb an I, that is influence, seek influence, type with praise to gain trust. They may emotionally blackmail us. That is a steadfast type who fears disrupting harmony. I want everybody to live together and live together and so and so. So it can be emotionally blackmailed. We have, they may use confusion and contradictions to destabilize C type, causing them to overthink and question their logic. So they play on the vulnerabilities. Each disk type may also exhibit a unique post-traumatic response. Disk type possible traumatic reactions for D, hypercontrol, withdrawal, and anger. I, dissociation, excessive people pleasing. S, numbing, shutdown, codependence. S, overanalyzing, guilt, perfectionism. Disk redirector bring like an observational lens to spot early signs of psychological distress or relational manipulation. For type D, red flags, early red flags, sudden drop in assertiveness or decision making, uncharacteristic emotional outbursts. Fixation or winning arguments in unhealthy relationships. For I, over attachment to new people or romantic partners. Avoidance of constructive criticism, guilt when asserting needs or boundaries. S, chronic apologizing or avoidance of disagreement, fatigue, numbness, or going along to get along. Difficulty leaving toxic relationships. C, over explanation or compulsive fact checking, especially after gaslighting. Hesitation to express emotion or needs. Feeling paralyzed by mistakes or disapproval. For DISC, it provides us with insights of behavioral style and social coping strategies, temperament theories, biological reactivity, and emotional regulation, genotype, phenotype, genetic susceptibility to environment stressors, neurobiology and biomarkers, physiological signs of trauma and chronic stress. Together, they provide like a 360-degree perspective, like the whole person, on how an individual may interpret manipulation, react emotionally or behaviorally, recover, or remain stuck in post abuse. A DISC may help therapists to tailor trauma informed intervention based on personality. Educators can identify students whose behavior changes reflect underlying emotional stress, typically outgoing I becoming withdrawn. What happened to them? They were. Parents can be taught to identify shifts in behavior that reflect toxic dynamics or grooming in peer relationships. Workplace HR professionals can identify relational imbalances, especially in cases of covert bullying, power dynamic, or exploitation. But here, some ethical, everything has ethical considerations. So what is the ethical consideration for DISC assessment? Should not be used as a diagnostic tool for mental, it's a strategy. It's a strategy, okay? So identify, it's a technique, for example, to identify and plan a positive intervention. So should not be used as a diagnostic tool for mental health, must be applied within the context of professional interpretation and trauma awareness, should be voluntarily and paired with more in-depth assessments when abuse or trauma is suspected. It may improve the insight on how individuals express or suppress needs, what makes them vulnerable to psychological abuse, how to recognize red flags in behavior that could point to manipulation, trauma, coercion. What types of support or boundaries are most effective in recovery? When combined with the temperament research, trauma biomarkers, neurodevelopmental insights, DISC becomes a practical and ethical tool for early detection and personalized intervention. One of the epidemiological studies of disease distribution and determinants in population over critical perspective of how personality trait, temperament, and trauma susceptibility intersect with population level abuse trend and public health outcomes. For example, childhood temperament, children with high emotional reactivity and low self-regulation are at increased risk of exposure to emotional abuse and peer bullying. The poly select on the cues of the child temperament. Abusive prevalence by personality type, while DISC is not commonly used in epidemiological studies, trait maps to DISC profile, high agreeableness S trait or high extroversion I trait have been linked to higher risk of emotional dependency, relational abuse, re-victimization. And that is based on Archer et al. 2001 study. Adverse childhood experiences or ACEs, that's Dr. Falidi, Kaiser Permanente. Higher ACEs scores correlate with long-term emotional dysregulation and heightened trauma responses common in individuals with C and S profile who internalize conflict. Genotype and environmental interaction, children with 5-HTTLBR, short allele in high stress environments show significantly increased risk of depression and anxiety, mirroring findings from trauma-informed behavioral research. In public health screening, children exhibiting S or I disc behavior, conflict avoidance, people pleasing, and trust high. So these are very vulnerable population. So they avoid conflict. They are people pleasers. They easily to trust. So high vulnerability may benefit from targeted social emotional learning interventions, especially in trauma-heavy environment, like foster care, refugee population, or areas with high domestic violence prevalence. Population-based temperament screening in schools could identify at-risk children earlier by combining desk-based behavior observation with ACEs screening. However, there is legal and some legal consideration, like, for example, to put the framework of abusive cases, personality profile, temperament frameworks like this, um, to to present a legal context in understanding the phenomena of manipulation and cunning behaviors like coercive control and emotional abuse, child custody disputes, domestic violence risk assessments, workplace harassment claims. So this is part of the context to build a profile of understanding the narrative or the phenomena. So part of it plays as well is psychological profiles, manipulation, surveillance, emotional harm, individuals with S and I traits. So they can be identified. Victim testimonies and gaslighting can be identified. Interviews and trauma forensic screening can be included. Risk assessment in custody cases, it can be included. So what traits they are more demonstrating DISC? How can this facilitate all the understanding of the population level of risk or red flag? Risk or red flag? For example, neuroscience, that role in and psychiatry, biomarkers and genotype interaction to explain emotional and cognitive effects. For legal studies, they focus on practical enforcement tool and policy level implications. If they don't have any remorse or empathy, it is hard to change them. The main thing is to change the person that impacted or has been compromised by these patterns of manipulation and abuse. Detect abuse patterns before they escalate. Inform trauma-informed policy and ethical legal practices. Support early intervention and prevention-focused systems. How can we prevent? How can we intervene in the right time before it is too late? The main thing is just to wrap up, is understanding the key psychological concept of temperament, disc, personality styles, and trauma neurobiology. Recognize the relevance of behavioral and genetic factors in trauma susceptibility. Appreciate the role of other disciplines like epidemiology and law in framing abuse and intervention, because it looks for the trends and the trajectories over time in a specific population, specific or in general, and which age is more susceptible or high prevalence in a specific age or gender or population. It is important to understand the neurobiological impact of abuse, identify biological markers that indicate trauma exposure, connect the trauma response with behavioral patterns observed in disc or temperament, HB axis dysregulation, cortisol, BDNF, inflammatory markers, brain regions affected amygdala, hippocampus, prefrontal cortex, corpus callosum, epigenetic, how trauma modifies gene expression. Try to understand population level data on trauma and personality vulnerabilities. Understand the legal definitions and the challenging in prosecuting psychological abuse. Many times they get away with what they do, so many are harmed already. Explore the role of temperament and disc in forensic context. Understand the key findings of immunological on ACEs, personality, trauma. Try to understand if there's some cases presented, specific age, gender, race, ethnicity, and understand it from the lens of health and disease and its impact on the quality of life of the person. How to develop skills to identify early red flags across personality types. That is important. That is understand the multidisciplinary collaboration for effective intervention. So the red flag, it's a whole different. It can present a whole different makeup of analyzing human behavior, because it's already been experienced. If we identify specific population with high prevalence experience, we ask them, what is your experience, what, but we have to count for the sensitivity of the questions and the state of their vulnerability and openness to share their vulnerability. And if there is this psychosocial distress involved with that, so that there is something outcomes of revealing realities and truth about unwanted behaviors that impact the quality of life and the state of health and disease. Understand the balance between privacy, consent, and protection as well. So we have to pay attention to that. Self-care, how to prevent burnout, because this is understanding very heavy information, and not many people would like to listen to it. Many prefer to live with their pain rather than to talk about it, because they understand that there is no hope. There is learned helplessness, and there is such a normalcy, our culture normalcy about that, particularly with females and children, as they are not allowed to speak openly, or if they speak out, it can be taken against them, and they are being abused more, or it was utilized for their disadvantage. So we have to understand that the ethical and core component of anything that cause harm is the invisible harm. I'm talking about the invisible harm because we have multiple disorders. They do exist in the biosystems, but they are not seen in the outer, like the physical abuse. It is seen for everybody. You see the bruises, the scars, but the psychological bruises, the mental, emotional, psychological bruises, majority unseen unless there is a deep investigation on that, on from neurobiology and from psychological assessments. We have to make red flag charts and red flag publications because we identify these. If you notice any, if you experience any of these, that is unhealthy. So what you need to do about it, we would like to highlight on that the red flags, to understand that we are not lab rats, we are not like manufactured objects, we are human beings. So there is a whole dignity and integrity for the life that God has created within us. So how we honor that, how we honor that, even though the aggressor doesn't know any clue about that, they don't have empathy, they mimic the emotions, but they don't experience the emotions. They can seem they understand your emotions so well, but this is mimicking. It's not real. It is fake. It's a mask to gain control and access and penetrate. So today I shed the light on aggression, cunning behaviors, temperament theory. That is, if you'd like to go and make your own research on it, that is the Rothbard and Bates 2006, reactive abuse, fights, word salad, psychological grooming, predatory brain, vulnerability and luring, cognitive dissonance and gaslighting, social media abuse, emotional manipulation. All this I presented today with the genotype, phenotype, and the red flags to manifest and its impact on the health and disease and how it impacts in our everyday life and who is more susceptible for that and how can we empower them. I'd like to shed the light on the red flags. Why? Because this is what we experience and that what leaves its imprint and its impact on us, and it's a perception, memory, and understanding of self and identity, and the alignment with life. It can shape misalignment, disorientation, and cause confusion. And this is not a healthy state for a person. So how come a child or adolescent understand that they are disoriented or they are manufactured in their perception of the reality to bring this self-distortion and the breakdown of the identity, and then having control or dominance over the life of others and increase the manipulative behaviors and abuse throughout. It can be subtle, it can be overt, and nobody can see it, and it can be seen part of the culture that is norm. So how can we identify this is not healthy? Because it's already impacting the trajectory of health and disease and the quality of life of the person, their neurofunctional structure, and all of that, their interpersonal relationships, and their how they are being perceived in their community. So how the temperament and the disc profile influence responses, what kind of support to provide for those vulnerabilities, the red flags to identify early before, increase the irritability, withdrawal, control behaviors, over dependence on others, avoidance of conflict, excessive apologizing, emotional numbness. You're going to see this a lot in the children, and children, adolescents, and no, majority females, you're going to see these behaviors more manifest in them: confusion, overthinking, reluctance, perfectionism. How many grow up as a perfectionism because they think that there is something about them they have to fix, they have to be 100% for the others to accept or approve upon them. So how many fall short on that, and they are pated on that. um, I hope today is presenting another lens of understanding aggression and cunning behaviors, and identifying the red flag for early intervention. And we understand the ethical consideration, self care. What are the legal insight on that? What are the trends? What are the prevalence or the epidemiological information that are presented from credible resources, that the person started to build an informed lens of understanding what is healthy and what is not, and how to identify it, set boundaries, limitations, know your uh, tune into your body language, what your body is telling you. Listen to it. Listen how many are disconnected and now is giving into the external influence that can distort the reality and identity. They become aliens to themselves. They are alienated from themselves. So understand who is provoking your defensiveness. And many fall short of that. A majority are women, and know this is a sign to gain control and how you are perceived in the world. Understand this page. I hope that, um, and you can brainstorm on that. You can go through another what red flags do you observe, how would you proceed with like um was assessing your situation, how might like a teen disc profile guide your understanding what traits you have, and what this indicates on your connections with others and interaction with others. What ethical issues may arise? How can I guarantee the privacy and confidentiality and safety? How can I address the safety concerns? uh, that is a whole different insights to and if you would like to go as well, we can go to the uh, I think I shared this before. I think I shared it. The National Network to End Domestic Violence, Policy Advocacy, and Education Resources for Crisis Control and Abuse. We have the Trauma Foundation. I think I shared that. I think so. I'm going to share it once again because I shared lots of trauma work around the nation. It's a lot of organization, but however, one thing that is presented is health literacy. The level of education and awareness, it is still in the infancy, particularly in specific collective cultures, and that the abuser may use for the disadvantage of the person coming from collective, who are putting the others in before them, and lean into this cognitive dissonance and dissociation and distortion. So they think it's normal, yeah. So normalize the abusive behavior. They don't have this muscle to build upon, that this is not healthy state, and there is a better way to maneuver through that. Um, a lot of work is happening. However, still we see the results of aggression and its impact in the neurobiology and the change of perception. Uh, so there's some other websites. I don't know. I try it. It's not an easy subject, but it's a reality. It's a reality. Um, That's another network. I think I shared it up as well, but this is for the studies, the International Society for Traumatic Stress Studies. I like the studies because they first they are the people that did the field work. They are the one who walked into deep waters and put themselves into this state of vulnerability as well to hear the stories of the survivors and um, the communities that are impacted with for example coercive control for physical and sexual abuse, victimization, and the disorientation of the mind, In I like the studies because they present with facts and exactly from the voices from those who um, walked the journey. So it's a completely different. That's why maybe I chose that from my undergrad health studies and health science. So I understand. I have to analyze the condition, but I'd like to analyze it from different perspective, so I can understand the big picture and we understand the severity and how it has been addressed and what integration needs to be happening, what other disciplines, who needs to be involved on this. It takes a village. Nothing happened, I stated, nothing happened solo. Nothing happened today or yesterday. It takes decades. So that is my part 12 in aggression. I hope I brought some lens of it, and we are building the aggression matrix. It's a work that I decided to commit to as part of my schooling and as part of as a student, as a scholar practitioner student, and that's how they call us, a scholar practitioner student. So we have to understand the phenomena in depth, the breadth and the width and the depth. So now we are in the depth that shows the breadth. So I hope it makes sense. But yes, uh, no matter what, when we hear the word advocacy, when we understand the reality, not the perceived reality, um, our decision making may change. Our perception of the reality may change. However, you are presented with a decision. What are you going to do with this information? What are you going to do with this data presented to you? Who's impacted? how you are impacted with it. So that is a question. I leave it with for you to make your assignment, to make your reflection, to make your journaling. Adopt a reflective mind. Reflective mind. Don't be like observant and take it as it is. Question. Many of the abusers doesn't like us to question or analyze or think or consider or reflect. They're using this tactic of controlling the reptilian mammalian brain and infuse fear, shame, and guilt. Fear, shame, and guilt. And imagine how this impacting many and leading them to a state of survival that no longer serve anyone. No longer serve anyone. I wish you well, and I hope this can present a new understanding, another sheet in the transcription of, of aggression matrix, and understanding how it can manifest in many ways. And what is your role in that, and what is your responsibility in that? That is up to you. I will stop on here, and peace.